Rex says, agree with Chadi. Sometimes the same person interacts differently with different people. So factors like good manager can be quite subjective. Well, Rex, I don't think that's the same thing. I don't know, because you're talking about a manager who is basically showing some favoritism to others or interacts with different people, right? In different ways. But Chadi is saying more like what he thinks is a good manager. It may not be what Patrick thinks is a good manager, which is completely different than what I think is a good manager, right? So I think that it's a slight difference. But what you're saying, Rex, does happen too, right? Where managers can have favorites, or the way they give out projects is not fair, or different things like that, right? So I think it's a slight difference there. Patrick says, agreed. I never really felt empowered or recognized for my work. Okay, yeah, that can be very very draining. I believe a good manager is one that challenges you to be better each day, also one that helps you develop your career. Yep, I'm on board with that. Tim says, order, respect, clear communication. Yep, I'm on board with that, Tim. Fairness, yep. Tim, what you're reminding me of? I read this book when I went back into management, particularly data science management. I read a book by a lady, or books. She has multiple ones. I read 2 of hers, by a lady named Amy Jen Su. Last name is S.U. You can look her up. She's Harvard trained. She writes for the Harvard Business Review. That's how I first found her. And what you're reminding me of is tone. The tone starts from the top, right? That's one of her big things. That how you act as a manager is how your staff will act, right? They will feed off your energy. And Tim, correct me if I'm wrong here, but to me, that's what it feels like you're describing, right? Because when they give you that order, respect, and like a clear direction, then that helps you also have that same clear direction and that same order and all that, right? Like it kind of feeds down into the team, right? And I think that's super important. So let me know if I was right on that, Tim, because I think you're hitting on some really important points there. Patrick says, I love that you emphasize the mentorship role. Yeah. Patrick, I think that's important early on in your career. But I gotta say that for somebody like me, like later on in my career, I need the mentorship less. So maybe you'll find that later in your career too, that you kind of grow out of wanting that mentorship, right? And also, I always bring up the book. You guys know I'm a big fan of Mastery by Robert Greene. Spoiler alert, Mastery by Robert Greene shows you that there is a downside to mentorships. You could argue that in the book, he is actually against mentorships. I'm going to leave it there. I'm not going to say anything else. I don't want to spoil it for you guys. But mentorships can be a negative thing, so be careful. All right, so if you haven't read the book, you got to read it. But he's actually, I would say, I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but I would say that the book shows that he is against mentorships, and you might be too after reading the book. Okay, so I don't want to say more than that. You may call me Tim says yes. Okay, so I hope I captured your thoughts there, right, Tim? Shadi says, more importantly, a manager who knows the difference between the company materials and what's on the ground. Yeah, that's also important for sure. So I'll give you guys my answer to this. Because again, I wanted to let the conversation flow, and you guys are bringing up some really good points. And like I said, I don't need the mentorship, and I'm really big on tone from the top. But the answer that I would give, and again, this is me at my stage in my career, is I've learned, I read this and I've seen this to be true. A good leader does not want a bunch of yes men around them. Or, the word is sycophants, right? A good leader does not want a bunch of sycophants around them. A good leader will appreciate when people around them say, hey, I love you, but I think you might be wrong on this. Here's why. And I have seen that in some of the best leaders that I admire. They do not want you to always just like nod your head and just go along with everything they say, right? A good leader will appreciate that in you. So that's what I look for. I want a manager that is not going to freak out when I have to stop them and say, you know, I'm kind of not on board with that, and I'm going to tell you why. A good leader will like value that in you, right? Because that in turn helps them get a different perspective. And a good leader understands that there's always a different perspective to your own, right? Whether you're right or wrong doesn't matter. And it's not an assault on you being right or wrong. It's just like a different view. And hey, have you considered this perspective? Like maybe we should also do this, this, and this, right? So that's my take on it. That's what's a good leader to me, where I want somebody who's not going to freak out just because I'm gonna say, like, yeah, you know, like I still work for you, like, you know, we're cool and everything, but I think you might be wrong on this, right? So, you know, there's an art to that too, right? There's an art to telling your manager that you know, maybe like, you know, they're not 100% correct, right? But that's what I would say. Now, I can appreciate that I'm saying that, you know, 25 plus years into my career, and I've worked for a lot of people. I've worked for good managers. I've worked for terrible managers. I've worked for great managers. But that's what I look for, you know, where I want somebody who can appreciate that, you know, having somebody who can go against the grain is a positive thing, right? Because some people will freak out on you, right? The bad managers, right? But that's what I look for. Joseph says, I agree with that too, Dennis. I think with respect to mentorship, I meant helping you learn that they are not going to give you the answers and to help you think on your own. Yeah, but that read the book, okay? Because Robert Greene says that there are downsides to that, Joseph. Again, I don't want to spoil it for you guys, right? And also because I'd be giving you my take on it, not the author's take, right? And I don't want to steal his work or misinterpret their work. But there can still be downsides to that, Joseph. Be careful, right? There can still be downsides to you pursuing things like that on your own. Okay? So I'm on board with it. I understand what you meant by it. But there are downsides to mentorship. There are downsides to it.